picked up guitar when I was a teenager, so 13 or 14. Played music. All of my friends, we also kind of started playing music at the same time, so gave us something really positive to put our energy into, which was really good for all of us. We still got into lots of trouble, but probably less than if we hadn't have had this other thing to work on together. And found guitar in particular because it felt natural to me, but it was also what was there because my dad played guitar. Gave me kind of an outlet to express myself, as well as communicate with my friends and other people in a way that verbally is just not possible. Music and sound go beyond description, so I think just tapping into that just a little bit as a teenager really got me started on music. Jazz and improvisational music like jam bands, the Grateful Dead, Fish, also opened me up to the expansiveness that's possible within musical context, where we can make it a conversation that we're having with the other people in the room, as well as playing with the energy of the other people that maybe aren't even playing music but are there in the space.
Loved jam band music, and just, that feeling of being in the crowd with thousands, tens of thousands of people, all sort of, dancing to the same music and having the realization of feeling the music, feeling the bass, like blowing your shirt, or the drums in your heart. And, just really realizing that the freedom and happiness and joy that you felt when everyone is, I always talk about, we always hear about musicians being in the pocket. So I had this realization the other day too, like part of that was, there's 20,000 of us all feeling the pocket at the same time. And so there was something very healing and magical in those moments. So then Jay and I started dating, and they needed a bass player. So Jay taught me how to play bass. And then from there, we continued.
For me, the first time I remember actually hearing and being really present with the gong was seeing David Hickey play. And he came to Collingwood and he has done a number of them. We also hosted them. He's awesome. But seeing him do his thing actually definitely, and I told him this, changed my life, because the improvisational components of music is of such interest to me. And then him being so open with just the instruments he used, the gong, just blew my mind. And I remember just sitting, like everyone's laying down, I'm just sitting there staring and just watching. It was beautiful.
Yeah, well, I remember seeing them at some of the Grateful Dead concerts. They would have them circles of gongs and people sitting in the middle, but I was always too afraid of the people playing them, not afraid of them themselves, but of my ears, right? Because they were sitting in the center, but people would come out and be, wow, so it was always so intriguing. And then again, my first big gong experience would have also been David Hickey, because, Jay and I have been together for 26 years. So his first, actually, I do think I went before you.
You did.
And sure. Convinced you to come, because then I thought, did I ever miss out on all of those years? But then the timing's always what it's meant to be. So just really being in that small room, and again, having that feeling of just feeling them. And I think it was the first time I felt my brain sort of erase while being sober. Yeah. So it's amazing how, the thoughts just leave you. And I don't think I had ever experienced that in a healthy way before. So I knew I wanted more of it.
you have a group of people coming who all already know each other. They're already at this like comfort level. So it really changes, because we did a lot of private group sound baths as well as public ones at our old space. So there's in the exact same spot, we were doing the same, the same environments, essentially the same instruments, not completely, but it was kind of like a control. But seeing the difference between people that are comfortable with each other and how open they are to the experience, as well as discussing it afterwards, was really interesting. A lot of times people in a public sound bath might be a little bit more just kind of keep to themselves, and that's fine because, I totally understand. But the private groups were really interesting because people would open up a lot more because they have this connection with everyone else that's there already. So it was really nice because it was almost like we're just there sort of, and everyone else is present with each other. And this type of interaction is really nice. And those ones we saw a lot of diversity with people attending. So there might be even small children, there might be elderly, grandma, as well as a whole family component.
If you were to count person by person from the beginning, a lot more women coming to the sound experiences. But it is exciting to see, men and, often it is the men that will write to us about their experience after because it wasn't what they were expecting. And, just sending messages later saying, this is what I felt or saw. No, is this okay? And it's like, yes, of course, that's your experience, because so many of us are used to this outside thing, like looking for outside help and thinking they don't have the power for themselves, but just, so it's sort of reconnecting them to themselves.
Music component we feel helps, especially the didgeridoo sitar thing, because then it's like, I think a lot of men have this, like we have this thing built in where we have to be, we don't really need to meditate, or we don't need to, do this type of stuff because we're strong. But if we can let go of that kind of stereotype and be open to these experiences, it can be as valuable for anyone that comes, as long as the openness is there. But I think the component of the didgeridoo and the sitar with the gongs adds a certain element of like, it's kind of like a concert maybe. Okay, I like music. Okay, I like concerts. I don't have to do anything. I just, So I think that does help us in some ways, as opposed to if we just maybe did singing bowls or something like that. I think there's an element there of perceived entertainment, even though that's not what we're actually technically doing, that might allow more accessibility for some people.
A lot of people will say afterwards that was the first time they haven't felt their pain for an hour or something, where they just had relief. And it's that physical melting away. But it does bring up a lot of memories, so a lot of emotions are triggered. And that can shock some people sometimes, for sure. And then there's also, I love watching, well, not necessarily watching, but seeing people experience when those emotions come up and the tears are coming, but they're so into it, or physically don't want to move, and just allowing the tears to fall and to roll, and not opposed to wiping them away. And I really think that's very healing. It's like, yes, you have permission to do this, to feel this. And, we're not sending our body these messages to stop. So.
But it gives people a chance to come and just be present and open to the moment and themselves and the way they feel. We always, you can check in with yourself before we start the sound bath. Typically, we have people like, how do you feel? Just notice any sensations, and then the same thing at the end. But just allowing people this opportunity to come up for air, and then whatever happens. And for some people, it'll be, oh, that was fun. I did a sound bath. Great. Other people will be like, I want to do this at my house. How can I do it myself? Other people want to come back all the time. And there's so many different situations and scenarios. They're all unique and all equally valuable. Yeah, I have this feeling like lately that music whatever I'm calling music, and it might not be what other people would consider music necessarily, but whatever I'm considering music is like this living thing that is happening all the time, and we're almost just like tuning into this thing that's happening under the radar in a certain sense. So if we're improvising or playing guitar or gongs or whatever it is, if I can kind of let go of, thoughts and my body itself and be in the moment and connected, you're almost just like flowing with this energy that's already there, sort of like the birds singing or the wind or something like that. But I think in an improvisational scenario by yourself is a little different than when you have other people. When you have a group of people, you're all kind of gelling, and that really to work in a way that is at its most optimum efficiency would be a group of people that are really comfortable with each other, who can almost telepathically know kind of what's happening and that type of thing. So Justine and I, because we've been connected for so long, we have this thing where we don't have to necessarily, discuss a whole lot of things. We just flow with it because we're open to it. But I really think music and sound is this living energy, this thing that we're all connected to, we're all a part of. It is us, we are it. And if we can kind of let go of our thoughts about it, we can tap into it anytime. And that's kind of ideally what would be happening.
Well, it's no expectations.
Yeah.
It's no limitations. So it's very, you're playing what you need or what you feel. So it's, who is in the room affects it, how we're feeling that day. But it's just, when we come to all of these things without expectations except to just do it, it's, you're releasing, you're emptying, you're unraveling, unwinding, and receiving so much from it all. Well, I guess part of it would come into the listening and slowing down and the silence, because if we're doing that as well in nature, it's all we need. But I just come again to how it makes us feel. As we're playing the gongs or experiencing the sounds in the space, and hopefully, these pockets or pieces of fully loving, unconditionally loving ourselves, how it changes the way we interact with nature. The color, everything's more vibrant. You can, as we're talking about your ears opening, hearing, the wind through the leaves, you can hear the song in that. And as sound is expressed and, enhances our sense of touch, feeling the sun, feeling the wind, it's just sort of deepens the connection to nature and your experience of it, and noticing all those little pieces of magic and abundance that nature and the earth gives us. When we're at the singing bowls, I swear I can see the earth breathing while we're playing there. And that is one thing I love. It feels very healing too, because as we're sending these sounds out, it's for all beings. It's, the four-legged, the fins, the fly, the minerals. It's the vibration we're sending out with positive intentions, entangling with all the vibrations we're also receiving, and also hearing the sounds of nature through the different instruments too. So, in nature, we hear the instruments, and through the instruments, we hear the sounds of nature. So they're very intertwined. And I can imagine living in some of the larger cities where maybe you're not hearing those nature sounds, that there would be a lot of benefit to finding the ways to hear nature through the instruments, just to bring yourselves closer and more grounded into that.
And being more present by playing or listening to these types of instruments just opens your awareness to your connection to everything else too. So there's a connection and an awareness that can kind of combine to open us, if we're not already open, to our connection to all of the other people, to our earth, to our universe, to, we are all essentially just one thing happening in the present moment. So I think these are tools that can help us connect in that way too. Yeah, even beyond earth, like to the whole, whatever it is.
Well, and it does bring that connection to our truest self. When we get into these very deep meditative states. And again, that is that you feel that connection to everything, to nothing. Part of what I love about the silence afterwards is all of this. I always think about it sort of as, when we learn about the solid, liquid, and gas, how the atoms or whatever it is. I'm not a scientist. How everything, right, when we're in the gas form, everything's more separated. And that's sort of how I feel like as we've come into this meditative state, that I have expanded so much and I have so much more space within me. So it's like feeling into that space, being comfortable in that space. So having that integration time to get to know yourself with space again. And I always love sharing with people that, if white has every color, doesn't silence have every sound? A lot of us are uncomfortable being alone, so that silence, even though you're with people, and it is still your own experience, it's just, feeling that comfort within you.
The silence has actually been like the
juice,
the most of, the medicine for me, just because there's something that opens up, like auditorily, but also inside when you've had this like meditative, these sounds have been going for 45 minutes or an hour, and then it's just, they slowly dissipate and everything completely opens, like the universe. You can hear, a car horn, like across town, like this type of thing that happens, as well as the people that are present. And I find the silence can be the most powerful isn't the right word, but the most touching part for me, I think, the silence. And a lot of people that we have come to us, like Justine's saying, and not a lot, but some, I shouldn't be, but a lot of people have a hard time with silence, like a really hard time, because there's no one, you're just with yourself, and that can be very uncomfortable. So I think that offering sound baths gives people a kind of a foot in with this, like, oh, there's going to be sound, it's going to be, your eyes are closed and things are happening, but the end piece might give them something that they didn't know they needed, which is this silence, just to be with yourself for a second in the universe, just to be by yourself, with yourself, and be comfortable with it. And meditation, we can get more comfortable with that too. But a lot of people, I think, the silence is as important as the whole thing. I think listening is something most, including myself, most of us don't do as much as we should. We're very there's a lot of output. I think I think all of us could stand to listen more. So I think by playing instruments like gong, or by improvising, or by being in a group that's working in this way where you're not really sure where it's going or where it's going to end up, you're not necessarily worried about the goal. You're on the path, and that's what matters the most in the moment. But your relationship to someone else who you're playing with definitely ties into how open it can be, or how less needs to be planned, in the moment. It also depends on whether it's for you at your house, or whether you've got 100 people coming. That's a different scenario, right? All these different variables.
A lot of us don't take time to listen. I think of that even in my conversations with people. We already have an answer or coming, or a comment to what someone's saying. Well, so we're not fully hearing them. So just coming up, I think it teaches us to have space and time well, not linear time, but just offering space into our lives and to have better communication, to have better relationships. And also when people come and we're, playing gongs together, because there's no expectations and no judgments, and everyone, it's same as sitting in circle, right? Everyone's equal, everyone is the same. So that non-judgment feeling, and you can't really play a gong wrong per se. So it's open to so many people. And I really look forward to a time when coming to something like this is not just an experience, but people bring sounds in this way as their practice and really feel the benefits, because the relationship that has grown in me so much, it's the relationship with myself, not so much even the relationship with others, because as I am working through the gong, it's, I've learned so much about myself, and that's what is helping my relationships with everyone else. Is the better I am with me, the better I can receive love from others or share it.
I think that if more people took sound as their own personal practice for themselves, not for their business, not for like a thing that adds on to something else they already do, or whatever, not to say anything negative about anybody's connection to sound, but if we took sound just as a personal practice, I think there's a lot to be gained from it. So people that might come to just a sound bath as entertainment, maybe even a few times as entertainment, if we could encourage them to consider humming at home, conscious humming, or maybe get a little instrument or whatever they're able to just connect with a couple minutes a day. I think over the long period of time, as we've seen with the instruments in our practice, that it can be very, very beneficial to us physically, mentally, spiritually.